So, Philip, day 3 of LogiMAT. It's been exhausting. At least we're sitting doing this podcast.
Finally, I'm sitting, yes.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of different things here. But I think one of the most interesting things, obviously, is Signavio.
Obviously.
So let's talk a little bit about process optimization, warehouse optimization, and SAP Signavio. And we've brought some, or you have brought some very interesting use cases. But I think before we dive into the use cases, let's talk a little bit about what is Signavio and what can it do for you.
First of all, I want to say thank you for having me. Thank you that I'm allowed to sit. I've been standing for 3 days and my feet hurt, but thank you.
Well,
I forgot the question.
the question is, okay, so tell us a little bit about Signavio before we dive into any use cases and what it can do for our clients.
If you remember the logo that I brought, that I opened up with, like you have this circle, and I always when I talk about process analysis and when I try to lean into what is actually Signavio, I always have to define what's the vocabulary, like what are we talking about. Because each of these modules is so different in its use case and so different in expectations that I always have to. They are all basically called Signavio.
Okay.
SAP Signavio, but they all do so different things, and that's why I spent the first 10 minutes defining. Okay, what is Signavio? What are we talking about? And how can it help?
Sounds perfect. Let's get started. Tell us.
Let's get started. So. You basically, the circle that I open up with, and I keep calling it a circle. I know it's a keyhole. It's supposed to be a keyhole. The circle is then defined in like you have your three categories, your outside areas, and they all gather in the middle. You have your collaboration hub. It's like your entry point to Signavio. When you log in, you land on the collaboration hub. You land on the first page of your process house, and then you can dive into each module and get to where you want to be. The modules are categorized as you have your modeling and your process management, which is where Signavio started. You have your technical analysis things. You have your process insights, process intelligence, where I feel at home, where you do the process analysis, what we talked about earlier. And you have your process governance things, like when you have your system house set up and you are happy with the value chains, with the BPMNs that you defined, then you can define workflows on, what happens when I want to make changes? How many eyes do I need to have these things approved?
Sounds good. So, and then can you elaborate a little bit on the process analysis? Because I think that's kind of what we focus here. One thing that I admit I had a little difficulty to understand in the beginning was the difference between insights and intelligence. And I built this little bridge for me. So insights is when you analyze all the data that is inside of SAP, but you don't necessarily have to have the whole suite of SAP to make use of Signavio, right? So you can also pull in data from other systems, and that's when process intelligence comes into play, right? So
exactly. Signavio wasn't very useful in its naming because insights and intelligence, they are roughly the same vocabulary, right? Your bridge is actually very useful. Like, as long as you're moving in SAP standard content, Process Insights is your go-to. It gives you your broad overview. Okay, how is my SAP system performing? How is my ECC, S4, EWM, TM? How are they doing? How good is our company in SAP standard? And maybe if you're transforming, like Process Insights gives you an analysis on which features you use and which features are interesting. And maybe you want to get some insights, okay, in my ECC, I'm doing these and these transaction codes. And then it can tell you, okay, look at these S4 features that maybe you should start investigating if you are on that journey. If you want to step outside SAP or if you want to start digging deeper instead of just having the broad overview, and you want to, like you found your pain points, you found your issues that you want to tackle, then you come with process intelligence, and you can either plug it into the process insights data. Like you don't need a secondary data extraction feature. You can just plug process intelligence on process insights and then use that data to drill deeper. Or you can do like a true mining, where you have your data extraction, which is in the same network as your ECC, S4, whatever, and basically extract the process data that you want to look at. And then you can define the rules and the KPIs, the metrics, all your scripts you can define yourself. With process insights, you're stuck with what you get. Like it's a click of a button. It's super easy, but you're stuck.
Yeah.
With process intelligence, it takes a few days to get set up, but then you can actually use it the way you need it.
Okay. That's interesting.
And now I breathe.
So bottom line is you don't need to have the full SAP suite to make use of this. You could have an external warehouse control system, and you could have other things plugging in, and as long as you can access the data, you can analyze that data as well.
To analyze process data, you basically only need an event log. An event log is you have your events that are taking part, like opening a sales document, and that event has a timestamp. And as long as we have that connection, we can analyze it.
Okay.
And if that's an SAP or if that's another system.
Sounds good.
You're welcome.
Okay, so what do you think are typical challenges when you first start a project and you dive into the process analysis? And
that's a very good question, Christina. Actually, I had that in one of my last projects because, like, usually the main issue is that when doing a Signavio project, it sounds a lot like a business topic, because you have your processes, you want to model them, you want to put your center of excellence, you want to build that up. But for the process analysis, and when it's a data topic, right? You need to involve IT very early. And we had the issue that IT was like the last person to get the information. Okay, we want to install new features here. We need an extractor. That extractor needs to be connected to our ECC, which raised a lot of red flags. They were like, we have to send tickets, we have to build servers, we have to install things. So you need to really reach out to IT, to include them early, very, very early.
To let them know about the technical needs that you have.
Exactly.
Okay.
Then one of the issues, it depends really on the age of the system. Like, we had a customer who's in the pre-phase for S4. Like, they wanted to understand what are they doing currently and where do they need to improve before they can start the transformation. So they had an ECC. ECC is okay, but that ECC was running on an Oracle database, which is like the last update they installed was 10 years ago. The data extraction for process intelligence runs on SQL scripts. The Oracle database did not like Westernacher checking with the SQL scripts, like they destroyed it. And the extraction scripts, which are supposed to run for like 3 hours, suddenly took 4 days per table.
And now we're talking about timelines again.
Now we're talking timelines,
exactly. Okay.
In the usual order to cash, you are looking at like 20 tables with big your sales order tables, and they take forever. And if you suddenly want extractions running for like 15, 17 days, and you have your workshop scheduled, your SS workshops in like 3 weeks, you start to sweat.
Okay. So you have to pretty much take into consideration where you're pulling data from and kind of incorporate this into the timeline, that there could be also technical struggles that will not make it as easy as it sounded when we just talked about this.
Exactly. And ever since then, I started asking customers what their database is running on.
Okay.
I want to prepare them. If it's Oracle, maybe schedule 4 weeks longer.
Good. That's good insights here.
You're
insights,
welcome.
haha.
Intelligence.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing.
You're welcome.
So, Ben, Let's talk about the first use case where you see big benefits of using Signavio.
Sure. Well, first use case for us is typical SAP EWM implementation, full implementation cycle. So we're going from discover to, in the end, the go live. Before we dive deep into the different stages or phases of a project, maybe just, to give a hint on what kind of problems SAP Signavio solves for EWM projects. It's like things or problems that happen during a project, which no one really talks about, but which are common in every project. Especially we as a consultancy who do a lot of these projects notice them basically in every project. Things like, how you get data, how you can prepare the data to analyze it to get a result. And then also stuff like documentation. Documentation in every project, is always is always pain. Let's say it like that. And then, as a last point is changes to, for example, documentation and design. How do you get it back into the original design? So all of these things are solved by SAP Signavio, or at least supported. This is why, for projects, it's extremely useful. The only problem, or the fact that I see today, is that since there's, at least according to my knowledge, nothing similar or a combination of products that is similar to SAP Signavio, or that solves the same problems, it's still something new, but the problem and the use cases are there. It's it solves the problems and the use cases that are there, but since it is new and no one really done it before, using SAP Signavio still feels like a luxury for a project. So you can do it, but you don't need to do it. You can work around it somehow. But I think if more companies will use Signavio in the future, and more companies will recognize what is useful about SAP Signavio, then it will move from a can use it to a must use it to stay, or to execute SAP projects with a lot of quality and small durations. But that's just as an introduction to the project phases themselves.
Okay, great.
Yeah, thanks. So if we look at the different phases in a project, for an EWM project at least, start off with a discover phase, where you try to get as much data from the customer as possible. You try to get a feel for what the customer wants to solve, and you prepare organization, data, etc. Here, the key fact where SAP Signavio can help is getting data mining, because usually we would have to get that data from customer documentation and interviews. Getting that data directly from the system is very helpful, especially since the data is also modeled in a good way, so you can analyze it very quickly and easily.
Would you say that's the most elaborate phase in the entire circle, or?
Well,
it sounds like a lot of work getting this data together. Is it, or is that just my impression?
Well, this data for a discover phase is usually more on a high level. So it's actually a good fact that you brought it up. Where this gets into more details is the next two phases.
Okay.
Prepare and explore. So discover is like a first step in a project. You just try to get a feeling for what the customer has. But second phase would be prepare phase, where it gets a little bit more detailed. This is usually based on the goal to define a scope. And if you want to have a scope, you need to have the as-is data prepared, and you need to define at least the way or the goal that you want to achieve for your warehouse. Here also, again, we can use the possibilities of SAP Signavio to get data, but also start and model data in SAP Signavio.
So can I imagine it like I have all this data and I just kind of push a button and then the model is created for me, or?
kind of. That's at least the first step. So usually,
Okay.
when you do that, when you get the data from Signavio, and then you can create process flows documentation in Signavio, it will be a good start. But there's always changes or process specifics that you cannot see in the system.
Okay.
So what you would have to do is take these processes and then detail them
Okay.
in interviews with customers or
Right,
workshops.
right.
Yeah.
Because I'm only seeing the traces in the system,
Yeah.
and I'm not seeing anything that physically happens or
Exactly.
who does it or when is it done. Okay.
System is, especially if you come from a legacy system, what is in the system is one thing, and then what actually happens physically in reality is a different thing.
Okay.
So this is why you have to check them.
Okay.
Moving on in our project phases would be the explore phase, where we are moving on from a scope and prepare definition to really define the to-be processes in detail. Here again, we can use the as-is processes that we created earlier as a baseline for how the processes in the warehouse are going to look in the future. And then as a second step, we would model these to-be processes. And usually what we like to do when we do EWM projects, especially for EWM projects in warehouses, we don't just create a to-be process and then say, all right, that's the IT concept, that's where we want to go. We use a last step in the explore phase to basically break our own design.
Oh, that sounds interesting.
Yeah, we basically try to find a way to, we had ideas, we had a design, but you cannot really be sure that your design works if you don't try to break it in the end.
Ah, okay.
So you're basically
it's kind of you challenge it or you test it.
exactly.
Or, okay.
Yes.
Okay, I see.
You play devil's advocate and then just try to be more safe and maybe change some things that you designed in the beginning and that might have changed when you came to the end of the design.
Okay. Reminds me of system testing, and then you enter all kinds of weird stuff that you shouldn't be enter and see what happens.
Exactly. More on a theory level, so to
Okay.
speak. But yeah,
Okay.
it's something similar. Yeah.
Okay, understood.
Yeah, and then I think when we have this discover, prepare, and explore, you are like with getting data and modeling data. You are you have a good baseline for the next phase, which is the realize phase, where, as the name suggests, we realize what we designed earlier and implement the solution in the system. We are customizing of different storage types, the overall warehouse layout, different process steps, and then also custom developments for specific needs of the warehouse. Now, when you do that in an EWM project, what always happens is that when the customer can actually, get a look and feel for the system and do small functional tests, or we do small functional tests, we often realize that at this stage there will be changes to the original design.
Okay.
Because design is on a theoretical level, and then you actually see it in the system. Sometimes, that's not coherent. So what we need here from SAP Signavio is a way to get all of these changes back into the original design, where the different modules of SAP Signavio can help us to achieve that goal faster and more easy.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I think from a discover to realize point, that's about it. In the last two phases, SAP Signavio can help, but it's not that strong. The last two phases are more...
What are the last two phases?
The last two phases would be deploy, where we have usually like user acceptance tests, where we prepare the go live. And if you have stuff like automation, you also try to do system integration testing.
Obviously, yeah.
Yeah, where you combine different systems together. And then once you have the final confirmation that the system works as expected, you let the warehouse become reality and have the go live, which would be the last phase, the run phase, where we have the go live and then also a small go live support phase afterwards for 2 weeks, for example. And yeah, as I said, in these two phases, we usually see the advantages of SAP Signavio from the earlier stages. Because if you try to do user acceptance test or even a go-live training, for your users, it gets much more efficient and easy if you have a proper documentation, if you build your solution on existing data, and you can actually,
benefit from all that has been previously created.
Exactly.
And okay, I see.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, very interesting.
And that would show a typical EWM project and the possibilities that you have with SAP Signavio for these. And I think it is a good use case to show and explain customers on how they can get advantages out of SAP Signavio.
Yeah, thank you very much. This was a very detailed description of all the phases, and I think this was great. So much for the implementation of it and using Signavio, but we also have another use case which I think is just as interesting for our customers, because once you have it up and running, you're not necessarily done yet, right?
That's true.
You brought the example of the EWM health check. I really like this example and the name of it. Yeah. So let's talk about the health check.
Sure. As you said, we have like a spot consulting solution that we call the EWM warehouse health check. And same, as we talked before, same as going to a doctor. You go to a doctor if either you feel pain, if something goes really wrong, or as we usually suggest, you go to the doctor on a regular basis.
For a checkup.
Exactly. To be sure that nothing happened, Now, if we, put that to the concept of warehouses or EWM, you would have, for example, a project that ended, go live is done, and now you want to be sure and identify if the expected goals were achieved. So the warehouse actually does what you want. It creates the numbers that you want to have, and everything works as expected and smooth
whether you follow the standard process just as you imagined you would.
Yeah, exactly. If we, as a consultancy, together with the partner, did everything the right way, let's say it like that. And as I said, that makes sense, same as a doctor, if something is not right, and if everything seems fine, and you just want to get a confirmation that it is fine.
Yeah. But it would also make sense, let's say, if your business changes or out of a sudden you're shipping way more e-commerce orders, and
definitely.
Your volumes are different, etc. You could use this to make sure that everything is still set up in the best way.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, if a company grows, they somehow have to check that every process that they created in the warehouse still works as expected with the new volume and data. So yeah, good point.
Yeah, right. I like this. So how often should you go to the doctor?
Well, let's not use this example because I'm not a doctor. Usually, what we suggest depends on what you did before. If you had a big project before, try and do it maybe 6 months, even 10 months after implementation was completed. If you're already running a warehouse for a longer time, definitely if you see something goes wrong, or on a regular basis, maybe once every 2 years. Yeah, this is what we usually suggest to customers.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now that we learned about the theoretical approach and the different steps that you go through during this process, where do you see the biggest challenges and the biggest hurdles that you need to overcome in your projects?
Well, if you look at reality, at EWM projects or implementation projects, as I said in the beginning, the problems that we can solve with SAP Signavio, the customers or also we usually, don't focus on these problems. It would be things like the data that you get from either the customer or the system that is always, problematic because a lot of the time the timelines and deadlines in a project are tight. So if you need to prepare information or if you need to get information as a customer from your colleagues and so on, and you're running low on time, you hit a deadline, then at some point you don't really focus on good results of that information anymore.
Okay.
So, just, be quick about it, get some information, just push it over to the consultancy, and then we're good. Now, we as a consultancy base our whole design on the information that we get.
So
this
you actually need good
exactly
quality
Yeah.
of data. Otherwise, it makes perfect sense, right? I mean,
this is
Yeah.
why it makes sense to focus on this topic and, get support from Signavio early on. And then basically what we get from that data, or what we create as a result, documentation, is, I think a lot of people who have done SAP projects in every module can agree, is also, a thing that I think projects should focus on more in the future. Because documentation is the baseline for a lot of phases and things that you do in a project. Let it be testing, let it be training, or just, in general, if you want to find some information about a development, you need a good documentation. And usually, without SAP Signavio, customers know they have to document, and that's it. We try to help them in the beginning and try to set up a strategy for documentation, but there's not really a focus on it. And if you use SAP Signavio, you don't really need to focus on it because the system does it for you. And it's a great baseline for everything, that comes afterwards. So these two things, are, in my opinion, problems that do occur in every project, but which definitely need more focus.
all right. Well, thank you very much, Philip. Thank you very much, Ben, for joining me in this podcast here. I really enjoyed this. I'm looking forward to another one. Thank you very much for listening. Thanks for watching this, and talk to you soon.